Here are my top 5 nervous system regulation techniques, part 2. Let's get into it. Okay, so these ones, again, if you haven't seen part 1, please go look at part 1. I think it's super relevant. Those are the techniques that you can do anywhere, anytime. You don't need anything specific. These techniques, I guess you could technically do them anywhere, anytime, but I don't know of anyone who really wants to lay on the ground outside, in the street, and both of these techniques require body movement, which is why I say you can't really do them anywhere, anytime, but they don't require any kind of equipment other than a wall. So first one is legs up the wall. And for those of you who have never practiced yoga, basically legs up the wall is when you lay on your back and you scoot your glutes all the way to the wall, and then you straighten your legs on the wall. So you're stretching your hamstrings, but what you're really doing is you're allowing your venous blood to flow back down from your feet. And this is super important. Usually you have your arms out to a T, and I have bit stains, but that's fine. And I will demo it actually really quickly here. Okay, so what is happening here scientifically? To explain this, first y'all need some context, which is basically how the arterial and the venous system works, right? So you have your heart, right? From your heart, you have 2 types of tubes or channels where blood flows. You have your arteries and your veins. Now, a common misconception is that arteries are for oxygenated blood and veins are for deoxygenated blood, which is mostly the case, but there are exceptions. And so the actual definition is that arteries have blood that is flowing away from the heart, and veins take blood back to the heart, okay? And this is really important to know because arteries, as they are pumping blood away from the heart, they have a much higher pressure. They are getting oxygen to the tissues as it needs oxygen quickly. Okay, so they have a higher blood pressure. There's more pressure in your arteries. Your veins have quite a low pressure. So when you're standing up, your arteries are easily able to pump blood up, right? Against gravity. So you can pump blood from your heart into your throat and into your face, right? Your veins have a much harder time pumping blood against gravity because they have a lower pressure. So they need mechanical help, which is where movement comes in, right? Skeletal muscle contraction helps your veins to push blood back from the tissues back to your heart. Legs up the wall does exactly this, right? It does it mechanically. So when you put your legs up the wall, the venous blood from your feet and from your legs that has been basically sitting there all day as it's trying to work its way up against gravity, comes back and pools into your thorax and your neck. And then what happens is that pooling blood activates your baroreceptors or pressure receptors in your thorax and in your neck. And that signals your brainstem that your blood pressure is rising, right? Because you have more blood pooling in that area. You have the same amount of volume. PV equals nRT from chemistry, right? So pressure and volume are inverse. So if you have more blood in the same space, you're going to have a higher pressure. So your pressure receptors tell your brainstem blood pressure is rising in these areas. And so your brainstem's response is to naturally lower your heart rate via the vagus nerve. So it basically tricks your body into a parasympathetic response or to come out of fight or flight by lowering your heart rate, by tricking your body into thinking that your blood pressure has increased throughout your body instead of just because your legs are up and you're bringing the blood that was supposed to come back to your heart and your chest and your neck. Isn't that so interesting? Okay, second one, child's pose. Okay, I hope that we all know how to do child's pose. As a yoga teacher, it kind of pains me if you all don't know how to do child's pose, but I will explain anyway. So basically what you want to do is you want to come to your knees, then you want to bring your knees wider than your hips. You want to bring your big toes into touch. So basically your knees are here and your toes are here, right? Then you're going to bend forward through the hips, bring the arms out in front of you. And it depends how active you want the child's pose to be. I like to press into my palms, keeping my forearms off the mat, reaching the arms as far as possible to keep the child's pose active, or you can sink onto your forearms, whatever you need to do. And I'm going to demo it here. So there's a few layers to why child's pose is super regulating. The first one is the forehead contact. When your forehead makes contact with the floor and it's pressing into the floor, it stimulates the upper branch of your trigeminal nerve, your facial nerve, the largest cranial nerve number 5. We talked about that in part 3 of the last series, right? So what that does is it sends a direct signal to your brainstem that registers safe environmental contact. Your trigeminal nerve is also really important in polyvagal theory. It's one of the 5 cranial nerves that rule your social engagement and your social safety. So in the last part, we talked about the vagus nerve and the glossopharyngeal nerve, right? Now we're talking about the trigeminal nerve. So now we have covered 3 of the 5 cranial nerves that are important in polyvagal theory, which I love. Okay, the second layer of why child's pose works. Abdominal compression. So when you are in child's pose, your abdomen is obviously compressed, right? Like you're leaning forward and you have like this anterior compression on your body. Basically, that means that your diaphragm has less room to expand downwards when you inhale. So it shortens your inhales and it lengthens your exhales. And what that does is it lowers your heart rate, because when you inhale, it speeds up your heart rate. And when you exhale, it slows down your heart rate. So if you want to have a net slowing down of your heart rate, you have to make your exhale longer than your inhale. If your inhale is longer than your exhale, your heart rate will end up speeding up in the long term, even if you're doing great breath work. We want to make sure that the exhale is longer than the inhale, unless you're doing a specific breath work technique that tells you otherwise. So the third layer of why child's pose works is because of the passive lengthening of the psoas muscle without muscular effort. Okay, so your psoas muscle is the muscle that connects your lower back or your lumbar spine to your femur, which is the big bone in the top of your leg, right? And so the top of your femur connects to the psoas and the back of your spine connects to the psoas. And it directly influences your pelvic tilt. So when the psoas is too tight, your pelvis tips forward and it can cascade all the way up your spine, because basically other muscles compensate for that aren't supposed to be engaged, and it causes chronic tightness in other areas, and it can go all the way up to the neck and into the jaw, which we can talk more about that later. I could do a whole series on the psoas and the muscles of the hips and the pelvis and the pelvic floor if you guys want me to. Actually, I'm going to, because I had a lot of people already comment that they wanted me to. Anyway, okay, so when the nervous system is dysregulated, the psoas is very much impacted. It's impacted by both the fact that it will curl in fear, and also it will mobilize, because when you're ready to run, that's one of the main muscles that helps you walk and helps you run. So when you are in child's pose, you're passively lengthening the psoas muscle without any muscular effort. So when your psoas is already in a very intense and dysregulated state, and it's already mobilized and tense, if you're actively lengthening it with muscular effort, it can actually cause it to mobilize more, and it can put more pressure on your psoas. So by being able to sink into the psoas and allowing it to relax in this pose, you're actually minimizing the risk that your nervous system will continue to mobilize the psoas, and it sends signals back through the nervous system that you're becoming more regulated, because the psoas is also, like the neck, one of those muscles that tells your body that you are in a state of threat. That is all for this series. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that this was as interesting to you as it was to me. Sending so much love. Bye.